Welcome back. Last lesson was the who. Today is the how. Threat vectors and attack surfaces. Every road an attacker takes to get inside, and every door we leave open without realizing it. Picture this: regional hospital, Tuesday morning, billing clerk gets an email from UPS with a tracking link about a package she actually is expecting because the office ordered new keyboards last week. She clicks. The page asks her to log in to confirm the delivery address. She types her email password. 11 hours later, the entire EHR is encrypted, the radiology system is offline, ambulances are being diverted, and the hospital is on the front page of the regional paper. One click, one legitimate-looking package notification. That is the entire breach. The threat actor was a ransomware affiliate, the motivation was money, but the vector was a phishing email crafted to ride on a real expectation. If you have ever sat through a tabletop exercise after a real ransomware event, you know how this story ends, and you know how it always starts. The vector is the email. Let me set the framing. A threat vector is the path. The attack surface is the sum of all the paths. Domain 2 cares about both. The exam will test you on individual vectors, phishing, USB, supply chain, and it will also test you on the bigger concept that every open service, every exposed endpoint, every third-party integration is a piece of attack surface that you either control or do not. CompTIA puts heavy emphasis on the human vectors. Social engineering. Why? Because the people are consistently the weakest link, and no firewall fixes them. Start with the message-based vectors because that is where most attacks land. Email phishing is the volume game. Mass unsolicited messages with malicious links, fake login pages, attachments. Defenses are email filtering, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC on the inbound side, and security awareness training on the human side. Inside email, you have variants you must memorize: cold, spear phishing, targeted at a specific named person, usually with personal details that make it convincing. Whaling, spear phishing aimed specifically at executives, the CEO or CFO. Vishing, voice phishing, attacker calls you. Smishing, phishing over SMS. The mnemonic is V for voice, SM for SMS, and the rest of the letters tell you it is phishing. Then there is business email compromise, BEC, which deserves its own call out. BEC is a high-value targeted attack. The attacker spoofs or compromises an executive's mailbox and sends a wire transfer authorization or a request for sensitive data. Losses are routinely in the millions per incident. The defense is multi-person authorization on wire transfers and out-of-band verification. If the CFO emails accounts payable asking them to wire $2 million to a new vendor by end of day, somebody picks up a phone, always. IM and chat platforms are the new email. Slack, Teams, WhatsApp, Discord. Attackers know that links inside these tools get less scrutiny than links inside email because users assume the platform is internal and trusted. Defense is application controls and link scanning inside those tools where it exists. Now the lesser-loved vectors. Image-based. Steganography hides malicious data or code inside an image file. Malformed images are crafted to exploit vulnerabilities in image rendering libraries. Buffer overflows in image parsers. The danger is they look like normal pictures and pass content filters that focus on text. Defense is keeping image rendering software patched and using deep content inspection. File-based vectors are next. Malicious Office macros. Word and Excel files with embedded VBA that downloads and runs malware. Microsoft has disabled macros by default in modern Office for years now, but attackers compensate with social engineering. The document opens with a yellow bar saying Enable Content, and the lure tells the user the document is from corporate or legal. Just enable the macros to view properly. Malicious PDFs use embedded JavaScript or exploits against PDF readers. Infected downloads. Legitimate-looking software bundled with malware, the classic Trojan. Archive files, ZIP and RAR used to bypass AV scanning by encrypting the malicious payload so the scanner cannot see inside. Defense across all of these is disable macros, sandbox file opens, and aggressive endpoint protection. Voice call vectors. Vishing, again this time with more detail. Attacker calls pretending to be IT support, the IRS, your bank, your HR department. The cousin technique is pretexting, fabricating a backstory to justify the request. I'm calling from IT about your account, we just need your password to fix the issue. This is hard to defend against technically because phones do not have spam filters at the level email does. Caller ID spoofing makes the call look like it is coming from a real internal extension or a real bank number. The primary defense is awareness. Train people that no real IT department ever asks for your password, and no bank ever asks you to read back the code that just got texted to you. Removable device vectors. The USB drop attack is the textbook example. Attacker leaves infected USB drives in the parking lot of the target organization. Curiosity wins. Somebody picks one up, plugs it in, and a payload runs. I have seen pen tests succeed at over 50% rates with USB drops alone. Then there is the O.MG cable, which looks identical to a normal phone charging cable, but has a hidden microcontroller that can type commands, exfiltrate data, or open a remote shell. Sitting in your conference room for a meeting, your phone is dying, somebody hands you a cable. That cable could own you. HID spoofing is the same idea. A USB device emulates a keyboard and types out malicious commands the moment you plug it in. Defense is disabling USB ports where you can, endpoint policies that block removable media, and user awareness that says, never plug in something you found. Vulnerable software vectors. Two flavors here. Client-based, an installed application with a known vulnerability, the outdated browser, the old Acrobat reader, the Java runtime nobody updated. Agentless, a web-based application accessed through a browser, no local install needed to attack. The persistent risk is unpatched software. Patch management is the primary defense. The other side is end-of-life and unsupported systems, where the vendor has stopped releasing patches entirely. Anything discovered after end-of-life is a permanent vulnerability. The defense for end-of-life is replace, isolate, or compensate with extra network controls. There is no other option. Unsecure network vectors. Open Wi-Fi, the public hotspot at the airport with no encryption. Anything you send is interceptable. Rogue access point. An attacker stands up an AP inside or near the corporate network. Evil twin, the more specific version, where the rogue AP uses the same SSID as a legitimate network so users connect to it without thinking. Then Bluetooth attacks. Bluejacking is sending unsolicited messages over Bluetooth. Annoying but mostly harmless. Blue snarfing is unauthorized access to data on a Bluetooth device, contacts, messages, files. Blue bugging is full takeover of the device. The attacker can make calls, send messages, intercept everything. The pattern is jacking equals messages, snarfing equals data theft, bugging equals takeover. Defense across the wireless side is VPN on public Wi-Fi, WPA3 for enterprise, and disabling Bluetooth when you are not using it. Open service ports. This is one I want you to internalize. Every open port is a potential entry point. Reducing attack surface means closing the ports you do not need. The principle is least functionality. Systems should only run the services they actually need. The risky ones to know: Telnet on 23, FTP on 21, RDP on 3389, SMB on 445. Attackers run port scans with Nmap during reconnaissance, and a finding of open RDP or SMB exposed to the internet is essentially an invitation. Defense is host-based firewall, network firewall, and periodic port scan audits. Scan yourself before the bad guys do. Default credentials. This vector is older than most of you and somehow still works. Devices and software ship with admin/admin or admin/password as the factory default. Default credential lists are publicly available and free. Attackers automate login attempts against known defaults. Routers, switches, IP cameras, printers, IoT devices, web admin panels, all common targets. The Mirai botnet built a 100,000 host attack network almost entirely off default credentials. The defense is one line: change all default credentials immediately on deployment. No exceptions. If you have ever found a printer running default admin on a corporate network, you know this objective is not theoretical. Now supply chain vectors, which is where the modern game has shifted. 4 flavors. MSP compromise. Attack the managed service provider and you reach all their clients. SolarWinds, Sunburst 2020. That compromise was the textbook case, where a poison software update reached thousands of downstream organizations, including U.S. federal agencies. Vendor compromise. Compromising the build or distribution pipeline of a software company directly. Hardware tampering. Physical implants placed in hardware during manufacturing or shipping. JTAG implants, firmware trojans. Software dependencies, malicious or vulnerable third-party libraries embedded in your applications. Log4Shell, the Log4j vulnerability of late 2021 hit millions of Java applications because Log4j was buried as a dependency in countless products that nobody knew used it. The XZ Utils backdoor in 2024 was even more elegant. A malicious contributor spent years building trust in an open-source compression library before slipping in a backdoor. The defense story is vendor vetting, software bill of materials, SBOM, and code signing verification before installing updates. Now the section CompTIA cares about most: human vectors. Social engineering. This is psychology, not technology. Quick reference list. Phishing, mass email. Spear phishing, targeted at one named person. Whaling, targeted at executives. Vishing, voice call. Smishing, SMS. Impersonation, pretending to be a trusted person. IT support, vendor, coworker. BEC, spoofed exec email for fraud. Pretexting, fabricated scenario. Watering hole, infect a website you know the target visits and let the target come to the malware. Brand impersonation, fake site that looks like a real brand. Typosquatting, register a domain that is one character off from a legitimate one. PayPal with a 1 instead of A and L. GU with zeros instead of O's. Misinformation, false information spread, sometimes unintentionally. Disinformation, false information spread deliberately to manipulate. Then the principles. Why social engineering works. 6 levers. Authority, claiming to be the CEO, the IRS, the head of IT. Urgency or scarcity. Act now or your account will be suspended. Intimidation, comply or there will be consequences. Social proof, everyone else has already done this. Familiarity or liking, building rapport before the ask. Trust, exploiting an established relationship. Every social engineering attack uses one or more of these. When you see a scenario describing a fake CEO email demanding an urgent wire transfer or your account is closed, that is authority plus urgency plus intimidation, all 3 at once. Memorize the 6, the attack surface summary, fast. Email and messaging, phishing, malware, BEC, web browsers, drive-by downloads, malicious links, XSS, remote access, RDP and VPN, brute force, credential stuffing, exploit kits, IoT and embedded, default creds and no patching, cloud services, misconfiguration, leaked access keys, endpoints, unpatched software, USB attacks, malware, people, social engineering, insiders. Every one of those areas is its own attack surface line item, and your defenses live at each layer. Let me share a vector pattern that has burned more than one shop I have worked with. The third-party integration. Your organization signs a contract with a payroll provider, an analytics vendor, a marketing platform, somebody you trust to plug into your environment, often through an API or a federated identity link. The vendor has access to a slice of your data. The vendor gets compromised. Now your data is exposed through a path you do not even own. SolarWinds was the giant version of this. Smaller versions happen all the time. Defense is vendor security questionnaires, contractual right to audit, SBOM when applicable, and minimizing the scope of what each vendor integration can actually touch. On the exam, when you see a question describing an attacker who breached a vendor and used the trusted relationship to reach the customer, the term is supply chain attack, and the example to anchor on is SolarWinds. Another vector pattern, the watering hole. The attacker does not phish the target. The attacker compromises a website the target is known to visit. Industry forum, vendor support page, professional association site. Visitors to the site get hit by a drive-by exploit. The genius of the watering hole is the target comes to the trap. There is no email to suspect, no link to verify. The defense is browser hardening, endpoint detection, and patch discipline on browsers and browser plugins, because most drive-by exploits target known browser vulnerabilities. On the exam, watering hole equals attacker compromised the site the victim visits. And one more, the typosquatting variant. Attacker registers a domain one character off from a legitimate one. PayPal with a 1 instead of NL, GU with zeros. Microsoft Update with an extra dash. The attacker then sends a phishing email with the typosquatted domain in the link, and the user, glancing at it, sees the right brand. Variants include Cyrillic lookalike characters that render identically in some fonts and homograph attacks. Defense is email filtering that catches lookalike domains, browser warnings for newly registered domains, and user training on hovering over links before clicking. On the exam, when you see a fake URL as the clue in a phishing scenario, the answer is typosquatting. One more vector worth building intuition around: the misinformation and disinformation pair. Misinformation is false information spread, sometimes unintentionally, by people who believe what they are sharing. Disinformation is false information spread deliberately to manipulate. CompTIA puts both in the social engineering bucket because both are vectors that can be weaponized to influence stock prices, sway elections, shape public reaction during an incident, or pressure an organization into making a bad decision under fabricated urgency. Defense is sourcing discipline, fact-checking, and on the corporate side, having a communications playbook that pre-decides how the organization responds to false stories during incidents. On the exam, the simple distinction: misinformation can be accidental, disinformation is deliberate. Recap: action checklist style. Before you sit for any vector question, run this list in your head. 1. Can you separate spear phishing from whaling, targeted at a person versus targeted at an executive? 2. Vishing versus smishing. V is voice, SM is SMS. 3. Typosquatting. Domain name one character off from real. 4. Watering hole. Attacker compromises a site the victim already visits. 5. BEC. Fake authorization for money or data, always financial. 6. Supply chain. SolarWinds, Log4Shell, MSP, SBOM as the defense. 7. O.MG cable, USB attack disguised as a charging cable. 8. End of life, permanent vulnerability, replace or isolate. 9. Default credentials, change them, no exceptions. 10. The 6 social engineering principles: authority, urgency, intimidation, social proof, familiarity, trust. If you can run all 10 of those in under 60 seconds, you are ready for vector questions. Next lesson, 2.3, we go inside the systems. Vulnerabilities, the specific weaknesses in code, configuration, hardware, and crypto that vectors exploit. Buffer overflow, SQLI, XSS, VM escape, 0 days. The doors that the threats walk through. I will see you there.